My lords, what a select little bunch of peers we are. Clearly, we all know our stuff on this. A few years ago, I think, introduced the first debate ever on facial recognition here in Parliament. And at that time, I recognised it as part of a wider package of changes that were on the route to dismantling parliamentary democracy here in the UK. Because when you combine facial recognition and other technologies with the draconian laws passed in the Police Act, the Public Order Act, and by ministerial decree, then a full-scale clampdown on any form of effective protest is now possible. We're a very short step away from what happens in Russia on a regular basis, as the authorities here attempt to stifle protests. If you add to that the plans for the government to spy on pensioners' bank accounts, to promote its own digital currency, and to link an array of biometrics to a digital ID card, then we enter a very, very different world where the state can switch on and off your access to the basics of life. We've already given the Home Secretary the power to banish anyone with a dual passport from this country, and with no right of appeal in this country. The laws are in place that allow the police to stop named individuals from attending a demonstration. Is the UK state going to set up the technological infrastructure that will allow for the internal banishment of those people with views they don't like, with the denial of privileges that we currently see as rights? We're entering this new era of a big brother state at speed, and democracy is going to be the victim of the inevitable crash. The UK police charged with combating extremism now have similar powers to the Russian police combating extremism. I was once called by the Met Police a domestic extremist, and they watched me for 10 years because clearly I was a threat to democracy. The difference, and they lied about it as well. The differences are dependent upon which police officer interprets the law. The vigour of those groups like Big Brother Watch, who seek to defend our rights, and the spirited independence of those lefty lawyers that the government complains about so often. In Russia, over 2,000 protesters against the war in Ukraine have been arrested or detained using facial recognition technology. These include people visited at home and questioned after a peaceful protest. This has also become standard practice by the Met Police, who trawl through video footage to identify people they want to arrest. Most importantly, facial recognition is now used in Russia to detain those on their way to a protest after being spotted by the Metro camera system. This mirrors the new laws in this country that allows the authorities to ban protesters ahead of demonstrations by issuing control orders or the new serious disruption prevention orders. The Met Police also have access to much of the TfL, Transport for London camera network, and yet the only political party to have ever pressured for constraints and safeguards to be put in place is the Green Party. These deployments of facial recognition have turned our city streets into mass-scale police lineups with hundreds of thousands of innocent people subjected to biometric identity checks. Yet, 8 years after UK police first rolled out this invasive technology, there's been no democratic consent to live facial recognition biometric surveillance in Britain. No legislation has been passed or even seriously proposed to approve or ban the use of live facial recognition technology in the UK. Instead, police operate in a grey area, enabled by a democratic deficit to use rights-invading technology with minimal oversight. And that's why we need to apply the UN standards as a minimum. The UN standards make it clear that such technology should not be used to identify people participating in peaceful protest. The UN standards that protests should not be used as surveillance opportunities. The UN Model Protocol prohibits uses of facial recognition to identify those participating in peaceful protests. These are standards designed for the likes of Russia, Zimbabwe and Uganda, but we actually can't meet them here in the UK. For example, Cheshire Constabulary have stated that they intend to use facial recognition technology to monitor, track and profile individuals. There are no safeguards in place to protect individuals' rights and the right to protest. And this is hardly surprising. How many times have we heard senior politicians and Home Secretaries saying in recent years that they believe in the right to protest, but not those particular protesters or those particular protests. We need a charter of democratic freedoms that enshrines the right to protest and to assemble. We must never have another situation like the Sarah Everard vigil, where senior officers at New Scotland Yard decided on a clampdown against people who were coming together to remember a woman murdered by a man nicknamed the Rapist by his colleagues in the Met, and yet the Met allowed that man to remain in their ranks. Yet our authoritarian government is proposing for the abolition of the existing scant oversight of facial recognition and other forms of advanced surveillance through its Data Protection and Digital Information Bill. You can't use a system designed to protect consumer privacy to protect you from state intrusion. My big concern is that we contest each of these new laws and technologies in isolation, rather than seeing the big picture of what this government is out to achieve. The ban on strikes, the granting of legal immunity to undercover officers who spy upon campaigners, and voter suppression are all part of a rapid slide into an authoritarian country. I hope that the next government will aim to restore the freedoms we've lost and replace the safeguards that have been dismantled. I look forward to hearing the Noble Lord, the Shadow Minister, on that. I will be pressurising the next government to make that happen and for our freedoms to keep pace with the technologies used by the state to restrict them. So I ask, will the government accept these UN standards?